Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Tom Cronin. Tom spent 26 years in finance markets as one of Sydney's leading bond and swap brokers. He discovered meditation in the early stages of his career when the anxiety and chaos he was experiencing had hit a crisis point, and it completely transformed his world, both personally and professionally. Founder of the Stillness Project, a global movement to inspire 1 billion people to sit in stillness daily. Tom is passionate about reducing stress and chaos in people's lives. His ongoing work in transformational leadership and cultivating inner peace through meditation takes him around the world, hosting retreats, mentoring, presenting keynote talks, teaching, and creating the Portal Film Book Experience, all part of his commitment to the current planetary shift. Tom is the author of 6 previous books for adults and a book for children called Missy Moo Meditates. Welcome to the podcast, Tom.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me along.
Yeah, so it sounds like you had quite a history going from one extreme to the other. So why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about where you grew up, how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, I had a really amazing childhood, which, is such fond memories on a farm about an hour and a half outside of Sydney. And, it's interesting, my parents still live down there in this beautiful old sandstone or sort of old cottage. It's about 180 years old. And we had this big farm and they're still there, and my bedroom's still there. My school sports trophies are still on my wall. And, I go down there quite regularly. In fact, we've got some fairly horrendous fires that have been plaguing Australia lately, and our house was very close to some recent fires, but we managed to survive them. But there was a great childhood, and then I ended up by default in finance. After I left school, I was supposed to go to university and do a degree in journalism, but I had a year off school and traveled around the world and had some time to fill in before the university degree started. So it's interesting how destiny prevails, and I just applied to a bunch of jobs in the paper, and before long I was on a trading room floor, 150 guys yelling and screaming, trading currencies and swaps and bonds and cash and bills and all sorts of things, and ended up there for 26 whole years. It was interesting, the sliding door moments in our lives of how things unfold, but I managed to leave finance to start the Stillness Project and create the film, The Portal, and the book, The Portal. So it's been a big transition along the way.
Yeah, it does sound like quite a transition. So was there a moment in time where you had a realization or an aha or something happened where you said, okay, I don't want to do what I'm doing now, and now I'm going to help the world meditate? That's a big jump.
It's a big jump, yeah. Look, the biggest transition happened when I was 29. I was 10 years into my career as a broker, and that first 10 years was really, we're late 80s, early 90s. We'd had Wall Street, the film, with Bud Fox and Gordon Gekko, and Bonfire the Vanities with, Sherman McCoy, Master of the Universe, bond broker extraordinaire. And we had, the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort. He started his career in 1987 as well. So these were the years that were just really decadent, debauched, narcissistic, greedy, a lot of me generation and me period of time, which was all about the I. And I was very much a part of that. It's very indulgent, narcissistic sort of tendencies. And that was, a lot of drugs, drinking, all sorts of crazy things. And that led to, by the age of 29, I was really struggling emotionally, physically, mentally. And I had I guess you'd call it a nervous breakdown. I was suffering a lot of depression and anxiety and insomnia and panic attacks. And eventually I couldn't go to work. I couldn't leave the house. So things got pretty severe. It was a very, very dark period of time in my life. I really had lost a sense of hope. I lost a sense of purpose, and I had a lot of addictions. And so it was a challenging time. And that's when I found meditation. It was one of those sort of serendipitous moments where I came across meditation while watching TV, and there's a documentary about a property developer that was using it. And so that kind of sparked some intrigue in my mind. And so that's when I started to do the research and found meditation, and it was phenomenal. It was almost like everything I'd been looking for in my life, and all the addictions and all the other areas that I'd been trying to find fulfillment. I was discovering it in Eastern philosophy and this process of transcending in meditation. And it was just mind blowing how beautiful and serene and fulfilling that experience was. It was quite an epiphany, but I wasn't quite prepared at that. You know, it's not like all of a sudden you just become an enlightened monk. I just want people to know that that's certainly not the case. It was a very gradual evolving process and changing process. You know, I was still in that career for another 16 years, but it was difficult to walk away at that particular point in time. You know, I still had dad and family and, you know, responsibilities financially. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do outside of that. I'd lost the sort of that fire to be a journalist and was making still a lot of money. So it was hard to walk away from. And it took a long time before it became more and more apparent. It took quite a few years before I felt such a strong overriding compulsion to start to inspire other people to use meditation, become a meditation teacher. Along the way, I was referring so many people to other meditation teachers, and I really felt, why don't I just do my teacher training? So I actually did that part-time while I was still a broker. I became a meditation teacher and a broker. I'd be working on a trading room floor and then leave at 5:30 once the market's closed and go and start teaching people how to meditate. It's kind of ironic, two worlds, very
Yes.
diverse. But eventually it was just became apparent it was time to leave and to go and do this full time.
Wow. So when you first started, so you know, you were 29, you found meditation, you researched it, you started using it. Just at that very beginning, you said, you know, some days you couldn't even go to work because of
Mm.
anxiety and the things you were going through. So what were the small changes you started to see as you meditated it, just in those beginning stages?
Yeah, well, it was quite, you know, I don't want to downplay the effect it had on me. It was quite dramatic, the effect it had on me, literally in the first week and the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Some of the biggest shifts that I started to notice immediately was the ability to sleep. I had suffered chronic insomnia for many, many years. It took me hours to fall asleep each night, you know, 2 to 3 hours just lying with my head on the pillow. You know, you're on a trading room floor, and there was quite often late at night with clients in restaurants and nightclubs and stuff. So, you know, obviously doing drugs and things, so that wasn't helping. But when I started meditating, it was just phenomenal to be able to put my head on the pillow and fall asleep, not just at nighttime, but, you know, on a Saturday afternoon, you know, sitting on the sofa. And what had happened was the cortisol and the adrenaline that was pumping through my veins on a daily basis, just the tap switched off. And I suddenly experienced what life was like not to be in that hyper stimulated sympathetic nervous system state. And my body just started to really quickly drop into parasympathetic. And that was when I was producing more melatonin and serotonin, oxytocin. So two things shifted predominantly, which was being able to sleep again, which was just a godsend. And that exacerbated all the other beneficial changes that came from having lots of rest. And I started producing more serotonin. So I just started to feel lighter. I started to feel less of that stress response, you know, particularly walking onto a trading room floor every day. You're constantly in this state of hyperstimulation and sympathetic nervous system. And I started walking onto that floor without that sort of hyper, you know, short, shallow breath and overwhelmed that I was getting. So there were some really big changes that happened quite quickly, you know, in the first few weeks. And I actually had experienced agoraphobia. I was taking time off work, but I was able to go back to work and as you know, as I worked for another 16 more years in that job without those stress responses. So it was quite amazing.
And it is. And when I think of all the people who have complaints of inability to get to sleep, fall asleep, stay asleep, um, and it's quite frustrating to have to do your day with not enough sleep and not feeling good. Your brain isn't optimum, anything. So that alone would make someone interested in at least finding out about meditation. So, you know, people have so many definitions of meditation. Can you explain maybe the kind of meditation that you teach?
Yeah, I mean, there are, as you say, there's so many different types of meditation, and it can be a bit confusing. You know, there's many apps out there with thousands of different styles of meditation, and it can be a bit overwhelming for people at times. But I'd like to distill it down into 4 different categories and make it really simple. And the 3 meditation techniques that are generally fairly mainstream is, we've got concentration, which is where we're concentrating on the breath or the third eye or a candle. We're trying to hone the attention into one specific point and hold the mind steadfast on that single point. And it's not a natural inclination for the mind to want to do that. So we do need a fair bit of force and discipline. And that's the nature of some meditation practices, having, forceful meditations where you have to try hard. And it can be a bit uncomfortable, but there's a good discipline in that. Other meditations are things like contemplation, where we're guided through a journey through our chakras or through our body parts or through a river or along a nice meadow or something like that. And so that's where we're using visualization and thought processes to enact a particular sensation in our body and to create new thought forms in our mind. But there's still a lot of thought and thinking in that process. So it's not like we're going into stillness and serenity. There's an activity going on neurologically in the brain. We've got chanting meditations where you might repeat chants out loud or in a group, sort of like kirtan type of experiences where we're all together and we're saying this over and over again, or chanting these sort of words or sounds. And that's a kind of group experience where we're kind of having an uplifting, euphoric type experience. But then the one that I teach and the one I've been using predominantly is a deeper transcending style meditation. We do use a sound that you repeat inside your head, but the point of that meditation is to actually not hold on to the sound and keep repeating. It's actually to transcend the sound, which means to let that sound drop away as the mind almost very effortlessly moves towards a more charming, deeper experience, which is an inner silence and stillness. And the mind will spontaneously forego thinking and forego the actual repetition of that mantra because it's found something even more delightfully charming. And that's what we call pure consciousness, or a state of stillness in the mind.
So when the person does that type of meditation, they're not actually saying the word out loud or the sound out loud. Yeah. They're just imagining the sound in their mind.
That's right. It's a silent repetition in the mind. And the reason why it's silent is because we're moving away from gross forms and phenomenon that's very expressed and tangible to subtle and subtle and subtle. And the subtlety and the subtlest experience is when there's no form, which is no thoughts, no words, no objects, no phones, no Facebook, no money, no friends, no family. The subtlest is when we're in formlessness, where we've gone beyond. And that sounds very esoteric, but what the experience is, as I'll explain, a student came out of that space the other day when I was teaching them on a weekend workshop here. They said, I don't know where I just went, but wherever it was, I want to go back there. And there was an experience of being present, but not experiencing the boundaries and the forms of what that experience of being present in was. And that's what we call simple awareness when we're in stillness. But if we say the mantra out loud, like a chanting mantra, a chanting meditation, then we're going to stay in the form of that chant, and we're going to stay in the form of the world that we're engaging in. And that's going to keep us, as beautiful as it is, it's still going to keep us in the world of forms.
Mm-hmm. And maybe this is a little esoteric question, but I was wondering, so you're hearing this sound in your mind, and after a while it kind of falls away, and then you're there in your own consciousness. And are you staying in your body and in your mind, or are you going somewhere? Are you actually going somewhere? Because he said he wanted to go back, so I was wondering.
Yeah, sure.
He traveled somewhere.
The best analogy to use is this. So you're not aware of your body, and as one of my students said last night at a meditation session I was holding, she said, I could feel my hands and my legs disappearing. And what that is the transcending of the limits of your physical form. So the best analogy we give people is, I'm holding up a phone for those people who are only listening and not watching. And this phone has a physical shape to it, a form, and that's the hardware. Mm-hmm. And you can touch it, you can feel it, and it's contained by its limits of the physical shape. Now, it also has an operating system inside the actual system. which you can't touch, and that's called an iOS platform. So that's the system that makes the hardware work. Yeah. And that's like our body. We have a physical form, which we're moving around, and we have that for 80, 90, 100 or so years. And we have a software, which is the program in the brain. Now that software in the brain has immense limits. There's only so much thinking we can do in a day. And the thinking that we do is deeply programmed and conditioned. You know, by the time we even come out of the womb and arrive in this world, we've been given a software from our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents that's been handed down. So we're arriving in this world with an operating system. And there'll be things 40 years later that you'll say or have personality traits that you go, gosh, that's just like my mother, or that's just like my father, because they're the ones who put the software into your programming system. And then once we sort of come into the world between 0 and 7, then that software continually gets more programming going into it. And then we, you know, go to school and have experiences, and that gets programmed. And so we've got this software now that has deep limits to it. And it's, most of it's not even yours. It's most of the environment that you came into. But this is not the only function of the phone. This is the interesting thing. The phone has a software and it has a hardware, but it also has access to a field. Is the internet in the phone? The internet's not in the phone. The phone's in the internet, right?
Yes.
Now, what we're doing in meditation is we are expanding out from the containment of the mind and the body, and we're accessing the field and becoming one with the field. And that field is all around us at all times. It's not in the pen, it's not in the mouse, it's not in the wallet, it's not in the, you know, the texter. It's all around us, and they're all in the field. Everything's in the field. And what we're doing in the transcending meditations is we're being able to free ourselves of the limits and confines of the forms of the mind and the body, and access the unlimitedness and formlessness of the field of intelligence. And that's when we start to get a much more creative and expansive experience of life that is able to transcend the program that's in the software.
That makes sense. So you have access, the person who's meditating and going into that field, they have access to everything without the filter that maybe would stop me from seeing something differently or seeing something new.
That's right, exactly, yeah. And this is why we get trapped and stuck in this mediocrity and this recycling patterns of existence in our life, because we're running from a software that's very old. And, you know, for me, for instance, one of the software programs that I have that I still have to work on to override is a software program around money that is, you know, 2-3 generations old, of potato farmers in Ireland in the cold 1700s. That at that particular point in time, that software and relationship with money was valid. Money was really scarce. Times were hard. Life was brutal. But if I'm running with that same software in 2020, then it's a very different world that I'm existing in, but running with a very old software. And so it's like having an Apple iPhone 2 software in an iPhone 11 hardware, and that's going to be incongruent. And so what we are able to do with this ability to transcend that software program of ours is to access a vast and more dynamic field of infinite possibility, and then start to embrace creative ideas and ways of thinking that are more progressive.
So are we only transcending that old programming when we're doing meditation? Do we get to bring it back with us? Does their programming change as we bring back new information?
Well, some of the benefits of meditation is that, firstly, we access the field of infinite creative possibility. So if we think about it, this phone is now a physical reality. It's been manifest, and it was manifested out of the field of possibility. Someone cognized the idea. So that meant that phone's possibility was always in the field. Infinitely, it was always in the field of possibility. it just so happened it took X many millions or billions of years before someone was able to access the field and cognize the idea, and then turn that from a field of possibility, which is formlessness, into a form, which is the idea, and into a deeper and more dense form, which is the physical manifestation. So the question is then, what's in the field of possibility that hasn't been pulled out of that field of possibility as a form? And that's infinite,
Mm-hmm.
which is really exciting, and that's what we get to play with. But here's the thing, that doesn't mean immediately we have unlimited form in our head, because there's still structures in the mind and thoughts in the mind and conditioning in the mind. So what it does give us the possibility of is being able to watch our thinking process and then start to work on upgrading traditional and habitual thought forms that we have going on inside our head through the ability to observe. When I say that, most people, they're the thinker. Internet, and then Descartes, French philosopher, said, "I think before I am." So he defined himself as the thinker. What we need to start doing is recognize that we're the consciousness that has thinking process going on, and then we start to be able to adapt and upgrade the thinking process as the observer of the thinker.
Wow. So going back to the beginning, when you were starting to use that meditation to survive and be able to work.
Yeah.
So you were going into this unlimited possibility, and that allowed you to actually sleep and get rest. Was it because you were seeing the reality of the filters that you were living with? Is it, how is it
Yeah, it's how do we connect those two? They're two very different things, and we sort of segued very quickly from being able to sleep to having unlimited creative possibilities. So that was a big leap. So let's try and segue back in again and tie that up a little bit, because it's a bit loose and a bit left out at the moment. So there's two benefits to these transcending style meditations. One of them, which is what we just talked about, which is being able to transcend the limits of forms and access a field of infinite possibility. The other is coming back to the sleep. When the mind goes into these deep states of non-neurological activity, so we're not thinking at this point. And if the mind's not thinking, then there's a deep restfulness in the physiology, because the physiology's hyperstimulation is based upon the thinking process and the action that comes from the thinking process, which is being on a trading room floor, or worrying about the future, or regretting about the past, and all of that's creating huge levels of excitation and stimulation in the physiology. And that's putting us into a sympathetic nervous system state, which is a stress response state. Now, if we go into a state of no thought, which is stillness in meditation, we've transcended the thinking process. Then if the mind is still, then we're not having neurological, biochemical, physiological changes in the body. There's a deep state of restfulness. Now, what happens is the shift happens very quickly from sympathetic to parasympathetic nervous system. And in parasympathetic nervous system, our whole biochemistry starts to change. I've been in big auditoriums in big companies, 400 or 500 people, and take them through a meditation process. And very quickly, a lot of them will start falling asleep or getting what we call the noddies. And that's because their body very quickly is shifting out of sympathetic, which is cortisol and adrenaline, to parasympathetic, which is melatonin, serotonin. So now the melatonin starts producing in the body, because the body's going, hey, you're tired, but you're also safe. And if you're tired and safe, then what happens is you need to sleep. And so the body triggers this release of melatonin, and that allows the body to restore the imbalance of fatigue. And so we see a beautiful restoration happening in the parasympathetic nervous system state, which is the body's innate design to optimize and restore balance. And it does that given the appropriate environment. And what meditation's doing is it's getting you out of the way, because you're the one that's causing all the distortion with your desires and fears and phobias, regrets and shames and guilts. And it gets you out of the picture, the thinker, And it allows this innate intelligence within the body to now override all of your misgivings and start to do what it does really well, which is optimize and restore. And so that's why this healing process starts to happen and why I was sleeping so well.
And that's so beautiful.
Simple, right?
That's
It's so
why
simple.
we need to get your message out here. So beautiful, that natural healing of our bodies. So,
you know, it's interesting. I was with a student last night who had intense PTSD. You know, she only learned about probably a month ago now, 4 weeks now, she's learned to meditate. And she literally couldn't, because of a traumatic experience she'd had with someone, she couldn't leave the house without having immense anxiety. And every person she saw walking along the street, she would analyze, is that the person? Is that the person? And this incredible fear. And she said, after 4 weeks, it's just bizarre. I can walk through a shopping mall without that fear, without that concern. And it's like this, it's obviously not perfect and she's not completely out of the woods, but just to be able to leave the house and go for a walk and do a shopping and opening up more possibility of removing these anomalies and these stresses that are stored in the body. So it's very powerful.
What other benefits are there to doing the meditation?
It's so vast, you know, it can go on the physiological level. Some of the benefits are reduced high blood pressure, reduced cholesterol, obviously better sleeping, better fitness, better breathing, better immune system, better digestion. On a mental level, we get better brain functionality when we're in the parasympathetic nervous system state that's sustained for longer periods of time. We get a better opening up of the frontal lobes. We get more creative. We get increased dense gray matter. We get better memory, reduced dementia, reduced Alzheimer's. So it has phenomenal benefits on the brain functionality. And then on the biochemistry, you know, we just simply feel more positive because we're producing more serotonin. When we're in sympathetic nervous system, we're in the stress response state, which is where most of the world is right now because of the lifestyles that we've created. We're having a rapid decrease in the production of things like oxytocin and serotonin, which are biochemicals to make us feel love or happiness. So we're getting a deterioration in our relationships because the inability to experience the sensation of love and also the inability to experience the sensation of serotonin, which is happiness. And so this is having a dramatic impact on the health and wellness of our society, particularly with the youth of the world. And we really need to start to de-excite our minds, to de-excite our bodies, to get us out of those sympathetic stress states, because just popping pills is not going to fix the problem.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And, you know, what part does actually suffering have in getting us to actually meditate? Because it seems like, you know, we eat poorly and then we go to the, you know, someone has a heart attack. Well, now all of a sudden they're eating well because they don't want to have another heart attack.
Yeah, suffering is, it's more crisis. Crisis is a very significant part of the evolutionary process. And in ancient Vedic philosophy, they recognize that evolution has three components to it, three forces. We have a creative force, we have a destructive force, and we have a maintenance force. It's called Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma. And you know, if you think about, again, coming back to our analogy of the phone, a phone can have a new design and a new release, which let's just call it iPhone 11. And by the way, I'm not getting any promo backhanders from Apple for these. It's just that's just the phone I've got. So iPhone puts out a new phone, and that's the creative phase. And everyone's like, wow, new phone, this is incredible. And it's got all these new whistles and bells, and it's this new incredible creative phase. Then we go into a maintenance phase where that sustains its new status quo. It's established as a new status quo, and it can be 2-3 years where this is the norm now. We've established a new level, and this is what the new phone represents. But if that phone was to sustain that maintenance phase for too long and ignore the process of change and evolution, which is essential throughout the entire universe, change and evolution is essential. But if we resist that, what happens is we start to invite crisis, or Shiva, the destructive operator. So what will happen is other companies will start producing new phones, and they'll have new whistles and bells. And I was going, we've got the best phone. You know, it's the iPhone 11, and, you know, 3, 5, 10 years down the track, they're still holding on and maintaining their status quo and not evolving. Then what's going to happen is that a deterioration will happen, which is what happened to Kodak. Now, this can happen in our relationships. It can happen in our countries. It can happen in our planet. And we're seeing this right now in Australia. It's a really interesting time where we've been sustaining a particular status quo for a long time. And that status quo worked really well for us. We're one of the world's largest providers of coal and gas. It's been funding our economy for a long time, and we're very attached to that. And it's been a valuable economy, piece of our economy, part of our economy, and it's something that was very beneficial to the creative phase of this country, and it managed to help us get through very difficult times and build and grow this country into a wonderful, wonderful place. But what we're doing here is sustaining that particular status quo way past its use by date. We have to start being much more creative and looking at what are alternatives to a fossil fuel energy system. What can our leaders start looking into as a progressive way to kick that can a long way down the road and go, hang on, if we keep holding on to this particular status quo for the next 20, 30, 50, 100 years, what are the ramifications of not evolving this system? And now we're starting to see some of that crisis. So crisis is that compelling point of inspiration for change. Now we can tune in and sense potential crisis coming, and we can cut it off at the pass by adapting and changing. But if we don't cut off the pass and tune into the need to change before crisis, then usually what crisis does is that forces us to change. And at that particular point, I did a post yesterday on the Stillness Project Instagram, that crisis is an integral part of evolution. And it's that point where we only have two choices, not 20, not 30. We just have two. We break down or we break through. And for me at 29, I could break down or I could break through. I was contemplating suicide. So at that point, break down was an option. A relationship can break down or it can break through. A company can break down or break through. And crisis is an integral part of the process that allows us a simplicity. It's a simplicity. Break down or break through. It makes things very uncomplicated. Not easy, but uncomplicated. And this is the point we're getting at in Australia right now. We can continue on this journey, which will be a severe breakdown. Or we can break through and get very progressive about what we can do with these incredibly intelligent people that inhabit this country.
Wow. So as you're talking about meditation, I'm thinking of maybe people who have never meditated, or like in my case, I think I've done the one where, you listen and you kind of follow along with your mind. But to me, I always thought maybe I'm doing it wrong because I can't visualize what they're saying. But you get lost in that.
Yeah,
And
sure.
so I know on your website, and you have so much available on social media for people. Where would someone start?
People ask that question, and I always think, if you start with the Rolls Royce, People are like, oh, maybe I'll just start with something really small. Like, if it's not going to work for you, like you said, there's a lot of meditations that are very difficult. They're very boring. They're not going to get you very deep. And for me, when I wanted to learn to meditate, I did all my research. I tried all the different techniques. And I went, you know what? I just want the one that's going to get me deep. It's going to get me into a profound state, and it's going to have a very powerful effect on me very quickly. And that's the one that I signed up for. Now, admittedly, some of these techniques are expensive, and they involve a process where you're sitting in front of a teacher. It's quite an involved workshop. It's not like you just jump on an app and start doing it. And so there are some limitations around these transcending style meditations. And when we talk about these, we're talking about things like transcendental meditation, Vedic meditation, primordial sound technique, the art of living meditation. So that's where you learn it in the presence of a teacher that's qualified and been through a training process and can actually take you through a deep understanding about the process of meditating and take you into the actual experience of meditating deeply. Now, if someone can't access a teacher because of their locality or can't access a teacher because of their financial limitations, there's two ways around that. One is obviously ask for a sponsorship, which we offer sometimes. Or the second thing is to look where they can access some of these programs online. So we have an online format that allows people a cheaper version where they can access it anywhere in the world. So we've had people on islands north of Finland and in the housing estates of Sheffield, England, and in Venezuela and Mexico, being able to now learn these techniques that were in the past inaccessible because we converted that into an online format. So they can get that on our either tomcronin.com or stillnessproject.com.
So they could start with online if that's, where they're at. And then you have live events, or do you have how are you teaching people?
Yeah, I do two ways. One is I teach them through weekend workshops here in Australia, in Sydney. And so I've got one this weekend, and that's obviously, like I said, it's a limited because you need to live close by. It's at my house and it's on Saturday and Sundays. And, we have lunch and there's a workshop, and they learn over the weekend how to meditate over 4 sessions, Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon, and Sunday morning and Sunday afternoon. But then again, if people can't come to my house here in Sydney, then there's that online option, and that's a 21-day meditation program where they can actually learn that technique over 21 days, which is a very intimate video of me up close to the camera, where it's almost like they feel like they're with me. And it's trying to replicate as much as possible what that weekend workshop would be like over 21 days.
Mm-hmm. And I know you also have some special retreats, like in Bali, and you want to talk about that?
Yeah, the retreats are just a great way to really accelerate their meditation experience, to accelerate their growth, to break free of a lot of the deep programs and conditionings, to get a lot of stress out of the body. Some of that stress is deep emotional scarring that's there from childhood or teenage years, or all through life. And it's about really going through a very powerful healing process of the physiology and emotions, but also a very powerful upgrading of their mind. And so we do those each year. We've got one in Bali coming up in May, which will sell out pretty quickly, as it usually does. And then we've got Byron Bay in Australia later on this year. And then we've got a lot more retreats coming up next year as well.
Awesome. So they want the full immersion. So could someone start with that?
Yeah, absolutely. They can start with the retreat, and they'll learn to meditate at the retreat. And then we'll really help them develop their meditation practice during that retreat as well. We'll give them some really powerful techniques. So the retreat's a great way to start if they want to just go all in and start with a 6-day immersion. It's a very nourishing and beautiful experience in the mountains of Bali. They get their own luxurious villa, and we give them they provide massages and saunas and spas and lots of amazing organic, beautiful food. So it's very nourishing and healing.
Oh, that just sounds beautiful, because it would be so memorable with all that, all those different beautiful things, the massage, the beautiful place.
Yeah.
And then the transformation. What a way to begin a new journey.
Yeah, it's sublime. And we constantly get such remarkable feedback from our Bali retreat because of all of those components added together. It's just a very holistic, powerful, healing and beautiful experience.
And when someone's learning the meditation, or they've gone to the retreat, is there support after that? Is it important to be maybe in community with other people who are doing meditation?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. Having community and support with their practice and their ongoing evolution is a big part of what we offer here. I mean, the Zen Academy for Transformational Leadership is a fortnightly coaching program that I offer, and they can get that both at Stillness Project or Tom Cronin website, or find out more about that. And that's every fortnight I send out a Zoom link for those who are the members of that group, and they tune in and we have a conversation and support them responding to their questions and queries. And it's really for people that wanted to move further along the line with their deeper meditation and spiritual practice, and also look to share what they've learned with the world. So it's called Zen Academy for Transformational Leadership. So mainly sort of people in that leadership space that wanting to not just accelerate their learning, but also to be in a community that's about changing the world. And then we're just about to launch very shortly what's called the Calm Club. And that's for people who are more in that space of suffering from anxiety and depression that want some ongoing support and tuition and just some hand-holding and some just letting them know that they're doing okay and that they've got some support and they've got some community around them. So we're launching that in February, which is really exciting.
Wow. And then you have a big project that I'm very excited to hear about, the portal. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I bit off a big chunk there, didn't I? Far out. So that's been a big project. It's taken 7 years to come to fruition, with the idea originally, as we cognized out of that field of possibility, the idea to make a film. And so that's now manifest and being shown in cinemas all around the world, which is really exciting. And it's still playing now after being in cinemas for many, many weeks now. And it's got a book that comes with it, and that book's out on Audible, Amazon, Booktopia, Book Depository, and in bookstores in a lot of 15 countries now, which is really exciting. And that book is a deeper exploration into these 6 stories. So what the film and the book is an exploration of 6 real-life powerful stories that have all gone through crisis and came out of that crisis by discovering meditation and using meditation as a mechanism to transform their lives, transform their experience of life. And it's beautiful, it's moving. People send us messages all the time, how they're reading the book on the bus and crying, or sitting in a park crying, reading these stories. It's very moving, film and book. And then what we've brought out with that is an app called Enter the Portal, and that's got guided meditations and yoga and daily inspiration and podcasts and breathing techniques and tips to launch. So that's really exciting. And then we're just about to launch in February with that film, book and app is a masterclass program on how to overcome anxiety and depression, which is a very holistic approach to reducing anxiety and depression in your life. And that was including things like supplements and exercise and yoga and meditation and grounding yourself in nature and all sorts of different ways to turn your life around.
Wow. So if people want to see the movie, the film, how do they do that? Where is it showing?
Yeah, well, where it is at the moment, and it's going to change as we go along, this sort of timeline. Currently, where they can go is to entertheportal.com. That's ENTER, theportal.com. And you'll find on that website the trailer, and you'll find all the different places that you can watch the film. It's in cinemas that are popping up around the world. Now, if someone can't see it in their local area, they can actually choose to be a host. So we're in what's called cinema on demand or hosted screening phase, where hosts all around the world say, I want to show this film in my city. And then we help them. We find the cinema, we put the film in that cinema, we provide them with ticketing, we provide them with a Facebook group, we provide them with marketing materials. And we pay some paid ads on Facebook to that cinema screening to help them get enough people into the cinema. And that costs, not only does it cost them nothing, actually give them a percentage of ticket sales. So it's a great way to share the film with the world. And we've got hosts popping up all over the world now that are wanting to create community. And the film is really a device for 2 reasons. One is a reason for people to bring community together. They get to host that screening and they can do whatever they want. They can do a talk, a panel, a guided meditation, a yoga class around the film. And then the second reason is that it allows the message of the film, which is an amazing possibility for transformation on an individual and a planetary level. And so it works on both levels.
Yeah, this just gives me chills, just the thought of the community and how much impact it can have on
it's wonderful.
the whole world. It's just like so exciting. So what would you say gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life?
I'd have to start with, firstly, just my family. You know, it's just a joy to, you know, my children, my partner, our cavoodle dog. You know, just the sanctuary of that place is really beautiful and nourishing and grounding. You know, I come back from traveling around the world. We just did a 30-city tour showing the film, and come home and it's just like, the kids have got homework and there's a school play on, and, kids sport, whatever, it's just really grounding and nourishing for my heart to be in the family environment. And teaching meditation, I think, is the retreats, teaching, coaching, and just seeing people go through the alchemy and the transformation is just really beautiful and makes my heart sing.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for all your contribution to the world. I know I just can see it in my mind, things changing, people, living better lives, happier, fulfilled, staying alive if they're going into depression, just from you sending this message out. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's a joy to be doing this work.
Yes. Do you have any last words of wisdom you'd like to share with everyone before we get off the podcast?
Look, I think, we're getting a sense of a fractured world, a world of conflict and a world of us and them. And I think we've got us and them happening between different countries and religions. And then even within our own countries, we're seeing it very polarized and fractured here in Australia and America, which is, again, more us and them. And we've got to really break down this us and them mentality and this fracture and realize that what we're looking for is unity. We're all craving unity. We're craving to come together. And eventually what I see is that coming together to be seen on a planetary level as like, hey guys, we're actually on this little dust ball. We've got to sort this stuff out. We're actually all breathing the same air. We're all using these trees, and we're all using this grass, and we're all using these vegetables. So we kind of got to work this out together. And sure, we might have different ways of praying to a different praying to some sort of vast spiritual entity, or having slightly different political persuasions. But I think the thing is, what we've got to all start working towards is finding unity through all the complexity. And that's what's going to really, and this is what's happening. I think the conflict and the turmoil that we might be seeing on the planet right now is an exciting phase of transition, and to not give up, not to get discouraged, to not feel like it's too hard, but to realize that beyond this complexity, we've got this really beautiful simplicity of a very harmonious and hopefully enlightened planet ahead for us.
Thank you so much. Yes. And we'd love to have you again. So
Sure.
it'd be great. It was so helpful. And I hope everyone who's listening goes to his website, listens to the movie, and learns to meditate, because I know I want to know more about that. So I'm very excited. So thank you so much.
Pleasure. It's great to be here. Have a beautiful evening, a beautiful day.
Okay. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.